Hi, lovely. In this video today, I am going to talk to you about that moment when I knew I had to stop drinking. When I was living in Spain, I was working as an English teacher. I had previously been living in Taiwan for 3.5 years, working as an English teacher. And before that, I'd spent 9 months traveling. I was in India and Sri Lanka. And that moment when I was in Spain, when I felt like such a failure, because the whole point of doing all of this traveling and living in other countries was all about reinventing myself, was all about being the person that I thought I wanted to be. And my expectation when I got to Spain, because I knew at that point I'd be coming back to the UK, was that, I should be coming back as, the best version of myself, the sorted version of myself. And when I realised I was sitting, snotty crying, bawling my eyes out, realising that I was just exactly the same person that I had been when I left the UK 6 years earlier. And that was just a feeling, because it wasn't really true. Obviously I'd learned a lot. I'd lived in a yoga ashram for 3 months. I'd taught yoga. I'd had loads of amazing experiences. So I wasn't the same person, but I was still the same person who was drinking, and I was the same person who was still overweight and miserable and angry. And I really, that day in Spain, sitting by myself, looking at my journal, thinking, why am I writing about alcohol every day, was a real kind of stopping moment in my life. It's almost like everything around me became very still. And I just thought, I have to do this. I have to do this, because otherwise, what's the point? Like, what's the point of doing all of these amazing things to not really change? It felt really sort of disappointing. I just felt like, well, that was all a bit of a waste of time and money, wasn't it? That, and I thought, I can't have that. I can't be that woman. I can't be that woman that's sitting here bawling her eyes out, going, I'm a big fat failure. That was just not who I wanted to be. And when I had that moment of, right, okay, let's spend a little bit of time consciously choosing to be sober. And I must mention, because I think this is very much an experience that you have as well, is that when you're a grey area drinker, it's actually quite easy to not drink. It's the staying sober that's the hard bit. And so when I went into an ashram for 3 months, obviously the rules in the ashram was no alcohol. So I didn't drink. I didn't even think about it. It didn't cross my mind. We used to have Saturdays off, if you like, which was basically just a few hours, and we would go into the town, and I would still maybe have like one beer or not, but it never occurred to me that I would drink while I was in the ashram. And I think that day felt so, I felt so low that I just didn't have any other options. I didn't have any other ideas other than stop, just stop. So I chose to do 30 days in that early stage, just because I didn't know any better and I didn't know anything different. And 3 weeks into being sober, I knew at that moment I would never drink again. I just had this feeling of pure unadulterated joy, and it was a lot of people describe it as a pink bubble moment, which I think is a bit of a shame, because the assumption is that you get this pink bubble, you have a moment of like, oh, isn't that great? And then the bubble bursts and you go back to being miserable again. But actually, I think it's the wrong way to describe it. I Because this is how I experienced it. I was walking to work and just had this out of nowhere. Nothing triggered it that I could see other than my sobriety, was this unadulterated, kind of overwhelming feeling of pure bliss and joy. And the tears were streaming down my face. I was so unbelievably happy. And this voice came to me, and I don't even think it was my voice. It was just this voice inside my head said, this is what happy people feel like. And there isn't anything more amazing than that moment in terms of my relationship with alcohol. So I really feel that if you get that pink bubble moment, is to pay attention. Pay attention to what's the feeling that you're having. This feeling of exuberance or joy or happiness or lightness or, just this feeling of everything's okay in the world, contentment. I know a lot of women that I work with are always striving for peace. So that was that moment for me. I was like, there's nothing is going to make me drink again, and nothing has, and it's not because I had that moment of I'm done with it, I am sick of it. It's not it was never the sick and tired feeling, sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. It was never that. It was never that feeling you have when you're in a relationship that is coming to an end and it's like, right, that's it. That today's the day. It wasn't like that. It was this overwhelming feeling of choosing myself instead of alcohol. And it felt so unbelievable. I wish I could bottle it and give it to you because it was such an amazing feeling. And I know that you've had that when you've tried to give up. I know you've had that moment yourself, um, and probably dismissed it as the pink bubble moment. So I would say to you, stop again or think back to your bubble moment, yeah, that previous moment, and actually see if there was something that you didn't pay attention to at the time that you can remember. One of the big things that happened to me on that day when I had that moment was previously for 2 decades, I'd been reading all the personal development stuff, the books, they're doing the courses, trying to improve myself, my personal growth. And I knew up until that point I was really miserable and I couldn't understand why, because I'd been doing all this stuff to make myself happier. And when I had that moment, it was like everything went technically from knowledge in my head to like understanding in my heart. I knew I deserved to be happy. I knew without any shadow of a doubt that my presence on the planet was worthy, was deserved, that I could live the rest of my life being happy. Nothing will ever persuade me to to drink again. And not because it does terrible things to me or, I hate my life. It's so good being sober. It's just the best experience ever when you've spent decades being more and more and more miserable, trying to kind of tinker around the edges with it. And what I would say from a kind of advice point of view is try and remember because you've probably done this a few times before, that the physical act of not drinking, I will caveat that in a minute, but the physical act of stopping drinking when you're a grey area drinker is pretty straightforward. It's quite easy. You mostly know how to do it. The difficult part is the staying sober. But what we often do, in what I've seen being done elsewhere, is that there's this, right, so day one, do this, day two, do that. And there's this constant focus on alcohol. My approach, and this is how I coach women, is we don't count days, we work on who you are and who you want to be. So, from my point of view, if you can stop drinking, I know you can stay sober forever, because the work that you need to do isn't about the practical steps of keeping alcohol at bay. It's about discovering who you are and keeping that focus in that direction. It's deciding how you want to live, who you want to be, and even if that's just being happy, that's a great place to be. So if you want to try a little journal prompt, you could try this one, which is, if I am sober, the best thing about it would be, you fill in the rest. You know the answer. It's there within you. And if any of this has helped you, please like and subscribe, because I'm coming here very regularly. Send me your questions, and you can go to my website, julesrutherford.com, and you can message me privately if you want some support, or you could book a discovery call. That's absolutely fine. But I'm here to help you, and I want every woman in the world who wants to stop drinking to stop and discover who she's supposed to be. So come and join me. Honestly, it's a great little gang. Lots of love, and I will see you soon. Take care.